Welcome to Tales of Resilience, the podcast that shares the real stories of the people behind animal rescue, the heartbreaks, the triumphs, and the moments that keep us going. I'm your host, Jolene, a mental health therapist and lifelong animal lover. This podcast is brought to you by Zodipods, a heart-led company celebrating the bond between people and their pets, and Animal Rescue Hub, our free nonprofit directory supporting rescue groups across the country. This episode may include references of animal suffering and death, as well as themes of mental health, including suicide. Welcome to Tales of Resilience. I'm your host, Jolene, and I'm honored to be joined by Kelly Bremken, the first veterinary social worker at the Oregon Humane Society. Kelly brings more than 20 years of experience in animal welfare, having worked with organizations across the country before stepping into this pioneering role. She holds a Master's of Science in Social Work with a certification in Veterinary Social Work, where she focused on intentional well-being, the link between human and animal violence, animal-assisted interventions, and animal-related grief and bereavement. At Oregon Humane Society, Kelly is breaking new ground by integrating social work into veterinary medicine and animal welfare, supporting both people and the animals at the heart of this work. So Kelly, welcome to the podcast.
Yay, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Very excited to have you a part of this conversation and hear your perspective on everything. We'll always kind of start first by learning more about the Oregon Humane Society, kind of just letting us know what you guys are all about and things that you're proud of and all that, and then talking about your own personal journey into this animal welfare space. So take it away.
Yeah, so very proud to be at the Oregon Humane Society. We're one of the oldest shelters on the West Coast. We are very proud of the work that we do within the community, and we recently opened a community vet hospital to increase access to care within the Portland community, hopefully for folks who need to be able to see the vet some for the very first time for their pets. And it's a really great spot for me because before I became a social worker, I was an animal shelter worker. And I worked here at the Oregon Humane Society in a bunch of different capacities. So, speaking about coming to the work or what brought me to the work, um, I really love being a social worker because I love being a helper, but I also was an animal shelter worker before that. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so proud to be at the Oregon Humane Society because I was here before I was a social worker when I worked in animal care as a foster care coordinator, as a vet assistant on a special project for the ASPCA. So I did a lot of other jobs or a lot of other roles before I became the veterinary social worker here. And it was just a really good opportunity to return to a place that I loved, with people that I love, in a community that I really love, and being able to support people and pets together in a way that I hadn't done before. So I'm really proud to be here, and I'm glad to come to this work in my 40s instead of coming to social work maybe in my 20s. I was very excited when I came to animal sheltering in my 20s because I was very excited to save everything and save everyone. And it was really exciting to be able to then, at a much more mature age, I hope, be able to come to social work at a different maybe point in my life where I was, I don't know, I just didn't have the patience, I think, when I was younger to be able to, the social work phrase of meeting people where they are. I don't know that I had that sort of patience when I was younger, maybe just not yet, or I didn't have the lived experience that I have now to maybe be able to zoom out a bit and ask different questions or ask folks where they're coming from or how they got to the point where they are with their pets. So I just really appreciate being able to be at the Oregon Humane Society now, returning to the spot where I was previously and seeing how far the organization has grown and the things that we're able to offer now that we maybe weren't when I was here in 2006, 7, and 8, when I was here originally in a very different role.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
I can appreciate the with with age comes wisdom sort of perspective. I think that
Oh,
that's very true.
gosh, I hope so.
You're right. We hope. Um, and yeah, it's what a lovely sentiment to know, you know, early in the 2000s where you were spending your time there and being able to kind of come back home, I guess, to roost and dig in a different way. That's very nice. That's an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, and I really got a chance, and I'm also glad I got the chance to work in other animal shelters in between those times because I originally started working in animal sheltering at Arizona Humane Society when I lived in Phoenix, and that was a great opportunity. It taught me about working in that environment. I did a lot of adoptions and I learned to work with people, and I got to see such a good end result.
Mhm.
And it was at that young age, it was this great experience of seeing like instant gratification of being like, you want a pet? This is a great pet for you. Let me place this pet with you. And it was like, boom, I got to see a happy ending right away. And then they were like, they were so great at onboarding you. They were like, let's work in adoptions. And then when you were really great at that, they were like, did you want to see what admissions looked like? And I was like, yeah, because I'm really good at this part. And then I was like, oh, so surrender is really hard. And then I was like, oh, okay, so this is difficult. And so then after working there, when I went to Oregon Humane, I really got a chance to see what the foster program was about, manage foster parents, which was such an exciting time for me because that's where I really got to see that I loved supporting people who love doing something with pets. And it was kind of my first inkling of being like, oh, so figuring out what kind of like fills my cup is like the phrase I don't really love, but this idea of what actually gets me excited about the work was supporting people who wanted to be there to help the pets in a way that I hadn't seen before. Because folks coming in wanting to adopt a pet was really common. But watching a volunteer want to come in and help something kind of fragile, especially because foster is a lot about medical, like animals that are medically fragile or animals that are behaviorally not quite ready or too young, right? It was just nice to be able to watch people want to give in that way. So it was really my first chance to be like, oh, I really like supporting the people along with these pets. And I hadn't really seen that part of the shelter before. So I really like that engagement. And then I worked at an open admission shelter in Florida when I lived there, which was a real difficult time. They were such a great shelter. It was the Treasure Coast Humane Society for the Treasure Coast. They worked so hard, and that was the first time I saw staff come together in a way where I
Mhm.
was like, oh, you don't have the resources I had at other places, but you're making incredible things happen by sheer will.
Wow. Yeah.
That was the time where I was like, oh, so you'll take things home when there's no space, and you will set up kittens in the bathroom with ringworm, and we all just have to learn not to touch them and rub them on our face. And right, like that was the first time where I was like, oh, don't touch things here. Like that has ringworm and or something, a disease. And I was like, oh, right, because we don't have a ward for that. And we don't have the type of money that I had at Oregon Humane or at Arizona Humane. So it was the first time I got to see staff by like sheer determination, keep things alive,
Yeah.
really work hard at something, and then also take things home and have such great difficulty saying no. And I was like, oh, this is a different side of sheltering I had not seen before because I'd worked at places with different resources.
Yes.
hmm So it was
Yeah.
a really great education. Then I went to I went to the city of Seattle, Seattle Animal Shelter, and I managed volunteers. And I was like, oh, volunteers, the lifeblood of our world, and also sometimes the bane of your existence because it's so wonderful everything they give you, and also so demanding that I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to brush up on some customer service and leadership skills immediately.
Yeah. It's people leadership in the end. Absolutely.
So it really was difficult for me to switch gears so much sometimes.
Yeah.
And also it was such a great like well-rounded experience in animal sheltering that I felt like I knew enough about the business of it that when I found out about the University of Tennessee Knoxville's program for getting your master's in social work and being able to then specialize in veterinary social work, that was where I was like, oh, this is going to marry all the things that I want to do together. Because when I worked at Oregon Humane and I was doing this special project for the ASPCA, we were working on driving intake down in a very particular neighborhood in Portland.
Mm.
So I was out doing outreach, like knocking on doors, asking people what they needed. And I will never forget one of my friends in social work was like, listen, I really love you, but why are you out there doing social work with like no skills? And I was like, wait, what am I doing? And she was like, so I need you to know some things. Like, don't ask people some of these things and don't like she was like, so there are some things you should know about being out and doing outreach. And I was like, oh, okay. And I got really interested in it. And so then I figured out a little bit more and learned about UT's program and wanted to go back to school and learned about all the different types of social work you could do and thought, yeah, this is for me, and really wanted to marry kind of all those ideas of how to support staff and how to support people through grief and loss and intentional well-being. And that staff piece is and always has been my favorite part.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the, like you, I think you used the word well-rounded exposure to the different roles, but also different types of shelters and humane societies, what you have access to, what people are capable of. I think that's an amazing perspective to have. And, even reflecting on shelters that don't have a lot of resources, which are a lot of the places I've been talking to recently.
Yeah.
It is, they give so much of themselves. And so I think it's great that you're able, I mean, obviously you're in a larger organization now with a larger funding source and larger budget. So it's, you have more at your disposal, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But to be able to, yeah, support the people, the staff who are doing this really hard work and sometimes traumatic work, depending on what the exposure level is.
And being able when I'm invited then to speak at a conference
Mhm.
or I attend someone else's conference or I get invited to speak at a shelter, I find that there is this spark of recognition when I look across the table and I speak to someone who's like, hey, I'm in a shelter of 12 staff. And it's like, right, I know what that's like.
Yeah,
It's so much nicer to have someone be able to look at you and say, I get it.
yeah.
I understand what it's like to know that there are pets in the break room and that there are crates stacked in your living room when you go home, and that you don't have enough foster parents, and that making space for animals means something different to you than it means to me at the Oregon Humane Society. Um, and I also know that being in a building of the size that I'm in comes with a bunch of I mean, to be fair, like champagne problems that are also difficult, right? Like it's very difficult as well. So there are times when I meet with other staff at big shelters and we look at each other and say, yeah. And there are times when I look around and go, telling someone no, even though I'm sitting in a building that costs $38 million to build, makes me want to pull my hair out, right? Knowing that I can't say yes to someone who needs $28 worth of care because we've exhausted that budget line this month
Mhm.
makes me want like to scream into the air. And I think that honestly, being a social worker has helped me versus being an animal shelter worker because being able to zoom out in a way and talk about systems
Mhm.
has actually helped me say, I understand the limitations of this. Whereas when I was an animal shelter worker and maybe no one had taught me that yet or used that language or that framework, I wasn't able to look at it that way. I was only able to look at what we were not able to do and why, and I didn't really understand sometimes why we couldn't do it because I didn't understand the systems of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And sometimes as a social worker, I don't know whether it's for good or bad, sometimes that we look at the whole picture so well or all the shades of gray so well.
Right. Right.
We
We're
can
allowed
ex
to curse sometimes.
we can explain anything, right? And we
Exactly.
look at this whole stew and this mess and say, well, systemically, here's the problem. Let me zoom out and tell you historically where this went wrong and why it's like this. And I can see where we're having problems and I can explain it, which does actually make me feel better somehow that I can explain it. And I'm like, oh man, the language and the framework does matter. So hopefully I can give that to folks though. It's nice to have a social worker on staff. And when we ask our staff, what does it mean to have me here?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we get back quite frequently is we feel like this place cares about our mental health because you have a role here that is designated for it. And also because we have some sort of shared language where we speak about all these things in the same way. And that does matter.
I think it definitely matters. I mean, I know that obviously different professions have their different lingo, and when you understand the lingo, you feel heard a little better instead of like trying to educate people while you're trying to get some support. So I think that's a really valid point that they're making, an incredibly valuable position to hold. If you could, I guess, walk me through like your day in, day out kind of role, like what does that
Yeah.
actually look like to be a social worker in that environment?
Yeah. I make this joke all the time that it feels like I'm in office space and someone looks at you and says, now, what is it you say you do here? Because it is really hard to explain sometimes. And um, every social worker inside of an animal shelter, it looks different for all of us because your shelter looks different.
Mhm.
So if I were an a social worker inside of an animal shelter that was not scheduled admission, my job would look much different. If we accepted wildlife and had rescue partners, it would look much different. If we had animal control officers versus humane law enforcement, that would change things. But for me, I'm embedded into our community vet hospital. That's where my office is. So I spend some part of my day supporting the public clients that come in to access our services at our community vet hospital. Sometimes that means that I'm helping someone just access our services through their case manager or housing specialist or victims advocate through the court system. So I might be helping someone utilize the services that we already provide.
Okay.
I might also be supporting someone through pet loss and grief as a public client here. And sometimes that's just offering them a fabulous reading list or some support about how to age appropriately talk to their child about grief and loss, offering them a reading list for children. Or sometimes I'm referring them to Dove Lewis, where Deborah Lee runs this incredible grief support group and these remembrance services for the Portland community, or maybe national groups or national apps, things that they can use to support themselves through grief and loss for pets. Sometimes I'm also referring them to services in town because there are folks that are accessing our services for community vet hospital who maybe qualify for other services in town through social services, but they don't always know how to use them. And I think that is just a byproduct of the economy that we're in right now.
Sure.
Folks utilizing services for the very first time.
Yes.
And so sometimes that's happening. And then I also support our shelter side. So we've got an animal shelter besides the community vet hospital. And for that, we're trying to keep people and pets together. So that might just be referrals to housing specialists or homeless outreach services or veterans affairs or other social services in town. It might be helping someone figure out whether surrender is actually the right option for them or talking them through it. And it might also be counseling our staff to figure out how are they best helping clients utilize our services that we already do. I might also be helping our humane law enforcement team work with someone that we're not charging with a crime, but we're trying to get them to partner with us to help pets that are in their care. So, for example, if there is someone that has been reported with a pet that needs help, and that person is not being charged with anything, but we're working with them, our officers might ask if I can walk alongside this person and help them with euthanasia decisions or accessing vet care.
Mm-hmm.
Our officers are so wonderful, but also there's only a few of them. And so sometimes I might step in to help. I might also figure out, do we need to call adult protective services or child protective services for clients in need? So sometimes I might weigh in on that. I also might support our staff if they're seeing really hard things, like clients fleeing domestic violence, surrendering pets. Those are hard for our admission staff to see, and they might need some support after. or if we've got humane law enforcement who've seen a hoarding case and they might need to talk to someone or need a referral, or just our staff in general needing someone to talk to about debriefing over like a traumatic animal loss or a behavioral euthanasia. If we've made that decision, do they need someone to debrief with or get a referral for a mental health resource?
Yeah.
How do we use our EAP? What does therapy look like? All those questions might come my way.
Wow.
Um, and then we also try to work with social services within our community to be sure that animals are included in their assessments, their needs assessments, their planning. Are there groups in town who service populations that obviously would have pets and that you could include them, the pets, in your planning? There are lots of great groups in town who work with folks who need help, and pets are going to be part of their population. So we work with a lot of great services in town for outreach for our unhoused populations, maybe folks who are fleeing domestic violence, lots of great people. And it feels like if we can just help them figure out how to work pets into co-sheltering or how to get pets included in even how to like ask if you even have pets in your needs assessment.
Right.
And sometimes they just don't even know how to do that. So sometimes it's even just a quick phone call or helping with the form. So sometimes I'm working with that. I feel so lucky that our executive leadership here, especially Dr. Kachis, our chief medical officer, he really feels like our staff deserves on paid time
Hmm.
mental health, like intentional well-being support. So on paid time, we are allowed to offer support to our staff. So we have like psychoeducational classes, like lunch and learns
Uh-huh.
for our staff on paid time. Things like conflict and boundaries and resiliency. We have those topics where we do like a little presentation and a discussion. We want our staff to walk away with skills and tools to use throughout their day so that I want them to know we recognize like the weight and the pace of the work and we're providing some sort of intentional well-being for them and that it's on the clock for them. They just have to make sure their team can do without them for the hour
Yeah.
once a month and most teams can rotate through to make it happen. So I feel so fortunate for that. Um, Now I feel exhausted having explained all that.
I was gonna say. I mean, I'm a little exhausted, frankly. I mean, I mean, you could definitely hear the strong social work aspect of everything that you're doing, and all of the moving parts that you're kind of paying attention to and referring and coordinating and supporting. I mean, um, what a value add that really is.
Thank you so much. It feels really good to hear that. I feel like just like all social workers everywhere, it does feel like you're working in a silo and sometimes you're alone or you're working on an interdisciplinary team, but you might be the only clinician in your building or one of a few. And so it does get a little bit lonely or it feels like, oh, I'm just putting out fires all the time.
Yeah.
So it can be difficult. So I appreciate that. And again, the work of being able to support staff or being able to offer like grief and loss support to people that feels so important and also a little bit never ending because there's only one of me right now. I mean, in a perfect world, I would love to have a few more. I do get the wonderful opportunity to have interns.
Oh,
That's something we did a couple years ago, and so I love that opportunity. And social work interns from local universities, so fun. They're so excited. I mean, the fact that we have puppies and kittens in the building next door never hurts. That they're like,
work perk, a puppy and a kitten.
yeah. I'm like, just don't rub them on your face because,
That's right.
ringworm.
Oh man, that's awesome. Well, that's really cool that you can do interns, but yeah, I'm sure just being one person managing all of that for so many different people, I'm sure it is overwhelming and certainly isolating at times. Do you ever do you ever find yourself questioning like how long you can do work like that, or if you made the right choice, or like tell me what that's like for you?
For sure. I think there are times when I look around and think, is everything going right? Did I do everything today? Of course. I think that there are wonderful aspects to the job that keep me refueled and going. And that's why I think I'm glad I came to the work at this age and being able to see those and also know myself a little better. So, knowing what are the things that keep me going, I know for sure that I'm someone that needs community, which is why having a job that's really isolating is difficult for me. So knowing that I will have to, and I had to build my own community, which is why I'm the first person to like join the peer mingle the first Thursday of the month and join the West Coast Veterinary Social Work group
Mm.
that the fabulous Rachel Wright out of Redmond, Washington runs, and being like, yes, I'm going to, no matter what, jump on that call on those days because I need those 45 minutes with people, even if there is Zoom box on my computer.
Totally.
I have to do those things for myself. And knowing that I need to have that person I can text and say, I'm losing it right now. I need someone to vent to. Or can you believe this happened? Like, I need to be able to do those things and know that there's people that I can also call for direct support,
Yeah.
other social workers that I work with. I feel so lucky to have such a really great community of support, but it did take a while to build that because they're like so lucky to have the International Association of Veterinary Social Workers. Like, what a great professional organization that we're so supportive to each other and we can find each other and go to conferences and, like, hi, help me, I need something, reach out and do those things. I also think that I'm fairly lucky to have. I directly report to our chief medical officer, and he worked with a veterinary social worker before.
Okay.
And so he understands that there are times when I look at him and say, so it's been a lot of grief and loss this week, or boy, we had three behavioral euthanasias this week, and I've set aside like 7 hours for staff, and those have been really heavy.
Yeah.
So I worked 32 hours this week, and that's all I'm going to be able to manage.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have to take, half of the Thursday and all of Friday off. So
Yeah.
being able to be a professional adult and manage my schedule that way has been so wonderful. That someone I work with hears me and believes me when I say, I'm crushing it this week and I'm pulling in a hot 44 hours because people need me and I'm going to do some transportation and I'm going to do this. And he's like, great. And then another week to say, oh, yeah, so I'm hanging on by a thread and I'm going to have to step away.
Yeah.
And that I've earned that kind of trust with him has been wonderful. But also being able to say, like, be vulnerable to say, I need this, and then do it. Because as an animal shelter worker, it never felt okay to say, I need this time off. And
Hmm.
then it never felt okay to take it because I always felt like I was letting everybody down
Yeah.
and that I was letting the entire team down when I wasn't here. And all I could think about was all the extra work everybody was doing in my absence. And then there was this moment where I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm a team of one. When I'm not here, it doesn't get done. And guess what? That's okay.
Yeah.
I am one person. And if it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done today. Um, so it became a little easier as the social worker to say that, probably because there weren't other people depending on me to clean that kennel or
Mm-hmm.
get that kitten to foster, or it wouldn't make it tonight. Because those things have a different weight on me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I fully can admit that. But being able to step away I still, every once in a while, I'm like, ooh, there's like a twinge of guilt there where I'm like, I have to leave today because it's been 8 full hours of back-to-back grief and loss appointments or back-to-back appointments with staff over euthanasia. And we've been through it today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a unique environment in many ways in that, you have staff and animals there constantly. And so things are constantly happening. So I imagine feeling like you can step away and know that it's okay, take some time and some, uh, I guess, permission building to do and to realize that, things won't fall apart ultimately, that will be okay. But it's hard. It's hard to trust that
Yeah. It is hard to trust that. And it's hard to remember that it's not like, I am awesome. I work really hard. People do appreciate me. My candy dish is very important here. It's how I lure you in. I have gorgeous soft chairs for you to sit in. I can dim the lights. There are wonderful things about this office. And also, we will all survive if I'm not here
Yeah.
today. It's all going to be okay. We will make it. And we know that because everyone can take a day off.
Yes.
It's very difficult for in animal sheltering in that world for us to say that's okay.
Yeah.
We fight that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's a difficult fight because there's a lot of pressure, right? There's a lot of pressure from the outside
Mhm.
to say yes, to be
Mhm.
available, to not take those days. So I think that it is a fight because you're at probably an internal, war with yourself about, the right and wrongs and guilt and acceptance, and then the pressure that coming from the outside world that's from their own feelings of guilt or anger or sadness or frustration.
Yeah. Not to mention the impact of that social media has on all of us in this world
Yeah.
of rescue and sheltering, the infighting that we can have amongst ourselves and the shade that we throw at each other for the things that we do. I feel fortunate that in Portland, there's the Animal Shelter Alliance of Portland, where kind of a few organizations band together and try to, work together. But it is even really difficult to be at Oregon Humane, which is this great big organization, and also recognize that sometimes as one of the bigger partners in the room, like we are not the kindest partner. We
Mm,
are often having rules that benefit us the most, and we are asking smaller partners to do the jobs that we should be doing but can't do for reasons. And I think when I worked at smaller organizations, I oftentimes was like, why can't the bigger group just do that? They have the resources, the time, and the money. And then I got to a bigger group and I was like, oh, hell, we can't do that because legally if
mm,
we got sued for taking that cat, we would lose $240 million, and then we would go bankrupt and not help 11,000 animals this year. And also, if someone sued us, we would just pay the $60,000 that they asked us for because we can't spend the money and go to court.
right.
So, right. So there are all these complicating factors. I mean, here's the social worker coming out again, where I'm like, here's all the factors that I can see from the macro view.
Yeah.
But this idea that I'm like, oh, it's so much more complicated than you realize when you're only looking at it from one point of view.
Right.
The problem is the work is so relentless that I understand why I can't take a beat and step back and look at it from anybody else's perspective, is because I am emotionally charged. I am overworked. I am in this. I am just trying to do what I think is right and I feel is like necessary and just. There's so many complicating factors that are causing me to have like these reactions. So it can be really difficult. I think we have so many great people working in the space in our community. And I feel, having worked in other communities across the country, I feel so fortunate that this is where I've chosen to work in this community for pets because we have so many great shelters, municipality shelters, small rescue groups, large rescue groups. Like Portland is really a great place to be. And also, we have tons of pets slipping through the cracks.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I'm guessing that's an inevitable reality.
Mhm.
Um, but it is you're certainly, I think, second person who's kind of highlighted, kind of the luxury that the Pacific Northwest has as far as shelters and humane societies and rescue groups and sanctuaries. Like there's a lot, and there's a lot of effort going into it, and the other people alluding to, the South having a different problem. And hopefully my goal is to continue to spread and talk to more people across the country because I think those perspectives are useful and important to have. But because yeah, there's different cultures, different needs, different complications. Um, But it is nice to know that we're in an area where we have so much. But yeah, people are going to slip, animals are going to slip through the cracks, people slip through the cracks. And that desire to obviously help and support all gets triggered in that, right? Because you want to.
Oh, absolutely. And it is hard to remember that. It's something we talk to staff about all the time here. I want to do the best I can for everyone who comes to us for help. And we have limitations to what we can do as well. So it's very difficult for staff to want to help people in a way that feels meaningful and feels like it's good for them. It's good for the person, it's good for the pet, and also good for our staff, right? And also that we're not overextending ourselves because I really wish that we all talked about animal sheltering and animal welfare like a social service because that's really what we are is we are a safety net for the community in the services that we provide, no matter what size you are. I think even a rescue that is small that provides something like temporary foster,
Yeah.
which is such a gap in services in our area, something like that, I wish that they would even talk about and consider themselves providing a safety net or a social service for our community because that's what we are. That's exactly the type of services we're providing. And when we talk about it that way, it feels more sustainable because it feels like this is really respectable work. I also wish the community could see animal sheltering like the profession that it is.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I think that that's an important reframe too. You're the first person to, talk about it as a social service, but it absolutely is that. And, um, I was talking with another shelter recently, and they were talking about how to protect the animals, they stopped inviting people in, right? Because it also became this place where people were taking, just to kill time in a day, right? To, bring kids and chill, which, I understand, but I think to maybe part of your point of seeing it as serious business and a social service, like there is fun in it, right? There are puppies and there's kittens and lots of fluffy things, but it's also a very, serious job, serious
Yeah,
business.
it is. Yeah, for our staff in particular, the animal care staff who are cleaning, feeding, watering, medicating, watching for signs of stress. We're teaching them what it looks like for an animal to show signs of stress, talking about fear, anxiety, stress, teaching them what that looks like and means. Then I'm trying to equate that and be like, so what does that look like in you?
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, no, let's talk about you too. But trying to teach them that. We're lucky enough to be in a building big enough where we can separate kind of puppies and kittens who seem to a little bit be kind of bomb proof. We're like, anybody can look at you because you love to look at anybody, most of you. And so having those on display for people to walk through and kind of
Mhm.
Google over and love, that's wonderful. And
Yeah.
having those animals who need a place to hide and a place to stay away, and those animals that are in protective custody or the ones that shouldn't be bothered. Like we're so lucky to have a behavior modification program here for dogs and cats that just can't be with the rest of the population here who need to have routine and a schedule and the same person to walk them every day, or they're like, I'm fearful.
Yeah.
So all that stuff we're so fortunate to have here. And I know that not everybody's shelter is built in a way where you could do that or have the staff to do that. So those are the things that I'm so thankful for, to have a system that provides that and have leadership that knows that that's where we want to throw our money at
Mhm.
and what we want to fundraise for. Those are the things that are really exciting to be like at Oregon Humane Society for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit and,
Yeah.
and talk about the resiliency component of the work. How do you define resilience?
I think that resiliency for me is whatever I'm able to do to keep myself going and returning to the work in a way that feels sustainable. Because I think for a lot of us, when we think about resiliency, it's not just returning to the work, but it's returning to the work in a frame of mind that can keep me going. So I know we already talked about me building community.
Mhm.
and stepping away from the work. And I think those are two super important components for me.
Yeah.
Being able to say, I am intentionally taking time off, I am walking out the door on time. And again, that does not always happen, I will freely admit. Um, and then I think we already touched on it, but this idea that I do feel able to zoom out from a problem and be able to look at something not just as the problem at hand, but maybe more so, how did we get there?
Mhm.
So I think one of the things I try to talk about with our staff, especially at the community vet hospital, is that a lot of folks coming in to get care maybe have never had the opportunity to see the vet before.
Right.
And most of the time, when someone here who is new thinks that something might be abuse or neglect, we sometimes have to talk about intentional abuse and neglect in animal sheltering and in vet med, in my opinion, and that's 20 years of opinion,
Mhm.
is a bit more rare than we might think. And a lot of times it is an access to care issue instead of intentional abuse and neglect. And I will say that when it is intentional abuse and neglect, it is very difficult and it is handled on a much different level and scale. But when it is access to care, for us, someone has ended up in a position where they're faced with what seems like impossible options or choices, and that's really hard to see. And so I think, and listen, as someone who has worked in a shelter for a long time and has heard probably reason after reason for coming to the shelter, for surrendering an animal, for seeing an animal in a condition that it should not have been in, I've probably seen and heard a lot. And also, those reasons over time started to sort of matter less and less to me, and I got really callous about them
Mhm.
back in that time period, back
Uh-huh.
when I was younger and in those days. And I started to believe people less and less. And I know now that that was probably a lot of, like, I wasn't really satisfied with that job. It was a lot of burnout. And for me, I was just looking at that immediate context of that person right then and there in front of me. And what I now think about is a little bit more about that person and their environment and a little bit more of context of not just where we are right now, but what happened to get us here.
Mhm.
What's going on with that person, with that family dynamic, with that community? What's happening with access to care for their vet? What's happening with transportation? What's happening with the way that they view owning a pet?
Mhm.
What kind of cultural differences do we have? What kind of judgment am I passing about that? There are lots of things to look at. And so for me, resiliency got much better, or I had increased resiliency when I was able to see that asking myself what has led us here was a little bit easier than saying crappy things about this person.
Right.
And also saying crappy things about that person made me feel crappy about the day and the job and myself.
Exactly.
So being able to lean in with some curiosity and grace was better for me in the long run, resiliency wise, and asking folks about what was going on instead of making assumptions and also instead of just assuming the worst about everybody, because that's what really wore on me over time when I was working in an animal shelter. And also, I know how I got there. I got there from seeing hard crap over and over again all day. And
Exactly.
also, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use your critical thinking skills, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have a good bullshit detector for things because there are things going on that you should be aware of. But I am still saying that you should believe people and you should believe them about their pets.
Mhm.
And I have seen people do extraordinary things to get their pets access to care at this community vet hospital. I have seen people do amazing things, and believing them and helping them figure out what's possible has actually made me so much more resilient in the work that we do. And I've seen it work for our shelter staff as well. And it also has made them more critical of things when they aren't going well. It's made them more able to see what isn't working and have a better kind of detection of what's not actually the truth over there.
Yeah.
So being able to lean in with curiosity and grace and ask folks what's going on or how did we get here instead of just being critical and judging. And then also when you feel yourself being critical and judging, just leaning out a bit and going, well, what's going on for me right now? Because that question of how did I get here so quick? Oof, man,
Yeah.
I made a real snap judgment about how we got here. Or, oh, I've said this now. Where am I right now? And I think back to this time where when I was working in shelters for a really long time, I will never forget being at a party and meeting someone who I had never met in my whole life. And she was a lovely, kind person. And she said to me, oh, we've got this lovely pit bull and I love this dog and he's the light of our life. And I was like, oh my God, I love pitties. Let's talk about him. And we were talking about this wonderful dog. And then in the next breath, she said, oh, and we're going to have a baby. And I immediately thought, and then you're going to drop that dog off at the shelter. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. And I was like, she's not going to dump this dog at a shelter. She just told me she loved this dog. And I was like, oh, there's the shelter person in you who's like rearing her tiny judgmental little head. Whoops-a-daisy. I was like, oh, there I am, like being a little fatigued and burnt out. I was
Right.
like, whoops, there I am. She didn't give me any indication she was going to do that. It's just I had been in an admissions setting for a while where people were writing down that they were surrendering a dog because they had a baby.
Right. Right.
And there are very legitimate reasons to surrender a dog when you have a child. And
Mhm.
I was like, oh crap, here I am. And guess what? That person was lovely, and I have no idea whether she surrendered a dog because she had a baby, but it doesn't mean she did. I just was like, everybody who has a baby and a dog ends up with just one of them, and I'm sure they're not giving their kid up. So I was like, whoops. I was like, uh-oh, here I am. So this idea that like we do get burnt out and you do stop asking questions and just start relying on this previous experience in your head.
Mhm.
But also, there are lots of questions and ways we can ask how we're getting somewhere and how we got there. And I do think that ends up being better, not just for the person and the pet, but I think resiliency wise, it ends up being better for us. And
Mhm.
I do compassion, satisfaction, and this idea of the joy that doing this work can bring to you, like that is really important to me when I work with the staff. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many important things I think that you're pointing to in that. I think, in the clinical terms, right, it's like a trauma informed care, moving from like
Yes.
what's wrong with you to what happened to you,
Yeah.
which is like it tries to take that judgment out of it and tries to open up this whole different perspective of a person, of a system that allows for compassion to be there.
Yeah.
Because we're coming from that frame of mind of judgment. Usually there's some version of anger in that, and it's
Yep.
hard to bypass that, right? When you're already like angry at someone for something they may not even have control over in some way.
Absolutely. That quote unquote choice you thought they made, right?
Yeah.
There is some great training for free from Vancouver Humane Society. They have some free training for animal shelter staff that is trauma-informed care, especially designed for animal sheltering folks.
Mhm.
And so there is this idea that folks are really leaning into trauma-informed care. And it's not like we're saying you got to be a social worker to work in an animal shelter, but this idea that there is a strengths-based approach and trauma-informed care and leaning in and asking questions of folks really is a great path forward, not just for the clients and the folks that you're helping, but for you and your sustained working.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's it's tends to be, I think, more of an empowered approach. And it sounds like as you offer that compassion and attempt to understand other people's worldviews, it also empowers them because now they start to see what's available to them. They can make different choices or evaluate things from a different perspective. So it's a more empowering versus disempowering place that we can come from. And uh, that burnout and that compassion fatigue, right? Like I am having a hard time having compassion for you right now because I know too many things and you're triggering me.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we talk about for staff is knowing what a definition of stress is and knowing what your stressors are. Listen, if you've got three call outs on your team, I already know that I'm starting the day on the stress continuum as I am not in the green and ready to thrive and vibe my best morning. So if I already know that going into the day and I've checked in with myself, maybe I already know. And just being able to have a team have some shared language around that, like listen, nothing makes my social work heart like grow three sizes. Like hearing a team be like, I feel like my window of tolerance is small today. And I'm like, I feel so proud. And then, or they're like, I checked in with myself and it's not going well for me today. I'm definitely going to have to take an extra break. And I'm like, dang it. That's it. I'm doing it today. This job is working. I'm doing it. It's happening. And I feel so good. And then other times I walk by and I'm like, oh no. Oh, it's all happening today. And then leadership's like, let's just get everybody pizza. And I'm like, no.
Sure, pizza solves all the problems. I'm pretty sure that's why they do that for staff all the time.
I know I was like at a farmer's market one time and a graphic designer had a card that was like, let's just get him pizza. That'll solve everything. And I was like, how many of those do you have? She was like 10. I was like, I'll buy them all.
It's very funny. So, okay. Well, I wonder,
Mhm.
so you were kind of alluding to some like transformative kind of stories that you've kind of been able to bear witness to, whether it's with people, maybe with animals. Do you have a story in particular of an example of resiliency or an unexpected transformation that you'd be open to share?
Sure. Um, I feel like there are lots of examples, some from my former animal shelter days, some from my social work days. We have a wonderful story from our community vet hospital. We've got such great veterinarians here. We've got we had a wonderful client who came to us with a dog with some unregulated diabetes, which always like, oof, it's already going to be difficult to regulate a dog. And also, we had the client was quite a character. We all loved him very much, and also he tested our patience. It was a client who was frequently not on time, frequently missed appointments, frequently did not follow directions, and staff was like, "He's so charming," and also really getting us. And the veterinarian who was working with him said, "Hey, we're we really like him and we're getting to the point where we're coming up on a real hard and difficult conversation. So we're going to need some support around how to help him because he also could be a little volatile with emotions." And I said, "Well, have we asked him what's going on?" And everyone said, well, no. And I said, okay, well, maybe we should start there. It's really funny though, I think is once your staff's like, oh, we have a social worker here. They're like, well, someone's mad. Could you come in? And I'm like, no. Or they're like, someone's sad. And I'm like, well, yeah, because they got a hard diagnosis of a pet. They don't need me. They're just sad. Like I can't do anything about it. I'm awesome, but I'm not magic. But this particular person, I said, well, let's talk to him about what's going on, but I would like to be there for that. Turns out this lovely gentleman, who knows I tell this story, he had suffered a traumatic brain injury years ago and was like, "Hey, sometimes I'm volatile on emotions, and also you got to write stuff down for me. You give me these reminders about when to be here. Also, I don't check my email. I don't know when to come in." And we're like, "Oh." Okay, so we're gonna have to just do a little bit more work with you, right? And we got so lucky that one of our veterinarians was a special education teacher who used to write all of these amazing in like individual education plans and all of these things. And she was like, "Oh, I'll make a plan for this person." And I was like, well, listen to the skills we have going on here. So we came up with this wonderful plan of texting him, reminders, all of these great things. Um, but we were finding he was still not doing a great job of giving the dog insulin, and it was impacting the dog's vision.
Mm.
And at this point, our vet staff was feeling very frustrated and said, "Hey, doesn't matter how charming you are, doesn't matter how much we like you or how much you're showing up to appointments on time now. The fact that you are not giving this dog what it needs medically and the dog could go blind, that means that that feels like intentional neglect. And for us, we're gonna anything in the state of Oregon for intentional neglect that includes like a dog losing a limb or the ability to walk or vision could be like a really serious offense. So they were like, we want to talk to humane law enforcement. And I said, oh man, we got to discuss this more. I feel like, man, we're going from like 0 to 100, right? So we wanted to discuss it, and there was just like not a lot of discussion from him. And when we when we discussed it, it was just a lot of pushback and a lot of emotion. And when I said, can I just talk to this person and without a big audience, because we've got a veterinarian and a technician, and we've got a director of the hospital and potentially a humane law enforcement officer, it just feels like a lot. And someone saying to you, you can't care for your pet, that feels really heavy. And I can only imagine the amount of shame and guilt around that. For someone who loves this pet, who's making it to multiple appointments a week,
Mhm.
there's something we're missing there. And this person said to me, in confidence and quiet, alone, hey, I lost my housing and I am living in a place without electricity, and this insulin needs to be refrigerated. And I'm keeping it on ice as best I can. And there are times when, with my traumatic brain injury, I'm forgetting to change the cooler. And then when it goes bad, I don't have the money to get new insulin. And so that's what's happening right now. And I know it's a big deal, and I'm doing the best that I can. And how embarrassing is this? I love this dog. And it became this very clear moment of someone saying, my circumstances have changed and I am unable to provide the care that I once did. Right. And so that became such a different conversation than what in vet terms, which my least favorite, you will also cringe at the word non-compliant, but the least favorite term, right? This person's non-compliant.
Yeah.
And it was like, ooh, I was like, are you writing that in the medical notes? We don't. I was like, no, we don't use that word. But I was like, okay. But the reasoning behind it by leaning in and asking more questions about what was going on and giving someone the space and building rapport and trust and asking what's happening here for you, right? And saying we wanted to work this out together. So being able to help someone figure out what we were going to do with that, right?
Yeah.
How can we then get creative and figure out how do we get your insulin refrigerated for you while you're in between housing? Because like this person was a veteran on a list waiting for housing, right? As a social worker, was I able to call the housing person and ask about where are you on the list? What's happening, right? Was
Yeah.
I able to talk about the pet and the pet's needs? Could we move you up the housing list? Could we figure out, was there any place nearby that served you lunches that would keep your insulin refrigerated that you could walk to, right? Because you didn't have transportation. Like, what were our options? We had so many options, but we had to get to the point of what was happening to figure that out. So we were able to get all those things worked out in a way that helped that dog be regulated and have that person feel like they were cared for and supported, and also have our vet team feel like the plan that they put in place was going to work. So the thing that really was important there was talking to our team about why contextualized care or like narrative medicine, why that was important. This pet and this person exist outside the four walls of this hospital, y'all. This is so much more than like what is happening inside this room. This person has a complex life. This pet and this person, I mean, look at all the things he is doing.
Mhm.
And I know that you're looking at all the things that is not happening, but if we're looking at the strengths of what's happening here, there's so many things that it's going well. And how can we get creative and solve this together and collaborate? And we have so many things that are going well that we could work together on. So it was just about getting creative and figuring out what was going on. But the thought of taking this pet away from this person was really on the table for so many people who
Mm.
were saying, well, he's just not able to make it happen. And it was like, but why?
Mhm.
But why? So this transformation of our team, so this is a transformation story of this person being able to, right, be able to take care of a pet. But I also look at this as a transformation of our team being able to say, how did we get here? Can we get creative about a solution for this pet? And also, how do we support someone where we have seen big changes like this? And what is the context of that care outside of this hospital? Why does that really matter to us? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of transformational pieces in there, and such a great illustration of that question, why is this happening, what's going wrong?
Yeah.
Because like you said, there were a lot of things that were pointing to the man's willingness, right? He just had some lack.
Yeah.
So yeah, taking the time to really understand and support him and keep their little system intact, keep the man and the dog together, right? Because they have their own bond and that's worth preserving.
Yeah. And I think there are lots of folks who really love their pets,
Yeah.
and maybe they don't show it or aren't able to express it in a way that I might understand or in the same way that I'm able to
Yeah.
do for my pet.
Yeah.
But man, circumstances change all the time for folks. And so I'm much closer to not being able to provide for my pet in the way that happened to this man than I realize. Side effect of being a social worker or working in animal sheltering, I think on the whole, is that you realize how quickly these things can happen to folks and to pets, and how pets and people end up in situations that are just, it's a really fragile balance sometimes. You see really great pets end up in your care at the shelter through no fault of their own and from homes that really, really loved them. And it's easy to forget that when you see so many of them come through. But a lot of times their stories are actually people loved them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it sounds like maybe, if I think about some big takeaways from kind of our conversation
Yeah.
today, it feels like being curious, being compassionate,
Yeah.
uh, and being open goes a long way. And also being able to recognize when you're getting to that place of maybe it's burnout or fatigued in certain ways and be able to check in with yourself, maybe use your community, your resources to get kind of back aligned in a way that's sustainable so that people can keep showing up and doing the important work that needs to be done.
Absolutely. That was a fabulous summary. Yeah. Done. No, that feels really good to hear that all summarized because it does feel like the work sometimes and the workload is never ending and overwhelming. So to have it summarized, to say it so succinctly, it does, that makes it feel digestible and doable in a way that doesn't feel like breathe your yoga way out of this, or like self-care is all on you, girl. You got to take care of you. Because like I do want to work at a place, I want to work at an organization that makes it a priority to give me space and time to do that. And
Yeah,
I want to have an industry. I want animal sheltering in general and rescue work. I want that to be, I want people to keep talking about it so that it is a priority,
yeah,
because like I can't do this by myself, and I need to do some work. My team needs to help me, and organizations need to do it, and then the industry as a whole needs to make space for this to happen and keep talking about it, because we can't I cannot do that by myself.
yeah,
You can't do this alone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm inspired by the role that you have. I think it's so awesome, and I also think that these conversations are so important, especially in this field, because it just doesn't get the same amount of attention, and there is a lot of you know, like you said, social media is its own little issue, and that's unfortunate because it tends to be a primary way that there's a lot of fundraising that happens on social media, and so there's a lot of dependency on that, and so you're constantly getting all the things through that space, but yeah, continuing the conversations and the work that you're doing around preserving the mental well-being of the people and the pets. So I think
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. If people wanted to support the work at Oregon Humane Society, how can they do that?
They can learn more about the organization at OregonHumane.org, where they can donate, which we always need donations, and they can also volunteer. We are always looking for more volunteers, not just in shelter. We have so many in-shelter opportunities, but we also need foster parents all the time. So that's always a wonderful opportunity for folks in the Portland area.
Awesome. Yeah, fostering, I think it's gaining more traction and understanding, but yeah, it's such a need and such a valuable resource for these animals. So yeah, that's great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Kelly. I really appreciate once again the work that you're doing, how you support your staff, and thank you to the Oregon Humane Society for supporting in so many avenues.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you again to Kelly Bremken of the Oregon Humane Society for sharing her story. If you were moved by this episode, like it, subscribe, share it with a friend, and follow us on Instagram. And until next time, may we all find our own tale of resilience. Thanks for joining us on Tales of Resilience. If today's story moved you, reminded you of your own path, or gave you something to think about, please consider sharing this episode with someone else who cares. You can follow us on Instagram at zodi.paws and animal.rescuehub to stay connected, or visit zodipaws.com or animalrescuehub.org to learn more about both of these organizations. And you can also email us directly at info@animalrescuehub.org. And if you or someone you know has a story worth sharing, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, be kind to yourself and never underestimate the power of a tale and a little resilience.